And we are live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the video today. So now I don't think anyone can accuse us of dodging controversial subjects, especially what we're going to cover today. It's kind of one of those things that a lot of antique dealers will have dealt with. And it's this idea that antique dealers lowball the public and rip off, as we said in the title. Everyone probably has heard stories of maybe a dealer buying something cheap and then selling it more expensive. So we want to tackle that perception today. Now, myself, I'm Kieran from Taliesin Antiques. To introduce myself, do you want to introduce yourself, Edward?
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Walter O'Neill, and I am the founder of antiquesarena.com. And I have a YouTube channel just dedicated to teaching everything about antiques and this business.
So we're both full-time. We do this for a living. We're both traders, dealers in the antiques trade. So this is something that we are all too familiar with. So let's go straight off the bat there. What do you think about that perception of antique dealers doing this to the public?
Well, we've came across this perception hundreds of times. I'm not going to go into the tool video now, but their opinion, they don't deal with car boot sales, but their opinion of car boot sales and car boot sale dealers and antique dealers they're basically disgusting places. The comments on my videos, when I do videos, is bottom feeders. The amount of people where I'll say I bought something for this and I'm going to sell it for this, and then they're coming on, you should be ashamed of yourself, you're robbing people. People don't have a high opinion of antique dealers and resellers in general. You take charity shops. A lot of the time, people have to hide that they're even a reseller or dealer because the charity shop people won't sell them goods. My local charity shop have even banned resellers and traders, and yet half of them are run by resellers and traders. But yet, this whole image around antique dealing being dirty and resellers being dirty is just short-sighted, narrow-minded, and wrong, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it doesn't allow for any nuance, and I do wonder where it comes from. I think people are just very, I don't know, does it feel like, I suppose, if it happens to you, and it's happened to me, by the way, I've sold something cheap and then found out it was actually worth a lot more money. Funnily enough, it's probably more likely to happen to a dealer than the public because we're selling so many different things. So do you think that people are so worried about that they just think of us as, well, whatever it is, bottom
feeder.
Bottom feeder.
Let me tell you a little story, right? I started doing antiques not far off 30 years ago, right? And actually, I was doing car boot sales to earn money to pay my bills. And people in the family were giving me stuff to sell. And a dealer purchased a 19th century Staffordshire cheese dish off me. Now, today, that'd be 10 or 20 quid. But back then, it was a lot of money. It was 30, 40, 50 pound 25 years ago, 30 years ago. So you were talking, that was a lot more money then than what it is now. And I sold it to him for £1. And when I walked around later on that day, I saw her on his stall with a big price tag and a big write-up, and I thought, did you think I got angry? No. I thought, how do I do that? I want a piece of that. That's what I thought. I never got angry he bought it off me. I didn't care. What I thought was, wow, what a lovely way to make a living. What a good idea. How do I learn? And then I spent 30 years learning. But I've had people, I've purchased stuff off people, and the next words out their mouth are, you better not be selling that on. In my opinion, what business is that of someone else's if they've sold it to me? And,
Yeah, definitely. And I got a little story as well, and it actually involves both of us. My early days of selling, I took a load of things to the car boot sale. And even now, when it comes to silver and gold, I'm still very...
I know what you're going to do.
Yeah. But back then, I think I bought a load of stuff off eBay and I was just getting rid of it. I looked at it, didn't know where it was. And along came someone picked up a little pair of silver tongs, I think, or silver colored tongs with a big smile on their face. And I sold that thing for a couple of quid. And it was that way.
They were the best set of silver tongs I've seen in my entire life. They had snakes all entwined around the handles, everything. Oh, they were amazing. They weren't English, they were solid silver, and they were spectacular. One of the best set of tongs I've ever owned.
And
but they do get angry because we're still friends.
Well, yeah, no, I've led up to this day just to embarrass you on a live. What I found with that was so I knew silver hallmarks for English silver hallmarks. I looked at it and I disregarded it. So to me, they were in a big value. Of course, it was actually the best outcome for me because the amount I learned from that as a result. Because of course you got the YouTube channel, and then I learned about silver hallmarks. I think even though we didn't know each other then, I think I messaged you and said, I was the one who sold it to you. Appreciate that you did a video on it because now I know about them. And it's something to look out for. That was my attitude. Didn't get annoyed, didn't get angry. I just thought, well, that's just that's part of the game. For me, it had no value. So what could have happened is I could have sold it to another dealer who doesn't, have this YouTube channel or anything, and I would be none of the wiser to this day of what they were. So, I think it's usually I think you find that's the best way of looking at things, isn't it? Is the lesson you got out of it was a lot better than probably the profit, maybe in the long term.
Well, no. I've seen people fight in a car boot sales. No, I've been doing car boot sales, right, since I was a child. I was doing them with my parents in the 80s, right? And when you consider I was born in 77, I was quite young. So I was doing car boot sales as a child with my parents. And that's how, when I needed money, I went back to car boot sales because I knew how easy it was to sell your household, your unwanted items and make some money. It just doesn't matter, does it? Let's be honest. It doesn't matter what people pay for stuff, what you pay for stuff. If you bought it, it's yours.
Exactly. Yeah. It's an interesting one to have a problem with what happens after it. It's almost like you still feel you own it in some way. But as soon as the transaction's happened, ownership has changed hands, and what happens after that is really it's none of your business.
Yeah, but they don't feel like that. Right? As I said, I've seen people fight in the car boot sales, screaming at each other. You bought that off me this morning for a pound, you're selling it for this. So what? You asked a pound, I paid a pound. So I've seen it all. I've been doing it a long time. I've seen it all. I've seen fights. I've seen arguments. I've seen dealers and public saying to dealers, you ain't buying that, you're a dealer, or taking it off them. But do you know what I do find? You and I are well known, right? Everybody knows us. Certain people, and we're not going to name names, but certain people up the prices when they know it's trade.
Oh, yeah.
You've had it recently where you go to a specific dealer and it's getting dearer and dearer and dearer every week. I had it in the charity shop to the point I stopped going there, where every week I went to the counter, the prices were higher and higher and higher, where they would go either trying to see how far they could push me or trying to push me out so they wouldn't buy it.
Yeah, that's an interesting kind of spin, isn't it, on this idea? So, if antique dealers are ripping people off, does that mean it's okay? Is it okay to rip us off? I suppose in the same way, because why is that fair? If you're willing to sell it to a public for this price, why wouldn't you keep it the same price for anyone who comes to your store? Now, I just grin and bear it. I just see it as sometimes you see it almost like a long-term negotiation, don't you? You just think, right, I won't buy it today then. And then you go back the next week and suddenly the price has dropped again because, they weren't able to sell it to anyone else. But, I think it's just factors in life you have to accept. I suppose it's worth getting into now. I think the perception a lot of people have who feel like this way is that, say I bought something for £5 and then I list it on my website for £100. They act like I'm getting that £100 and it's going straight in my pocket and I'm getting £95 profit. Now, us two running businesses know that is far from the reality of it. Do you want to go into, I suppose, the costs of achieving £100 on an item?
Well, if you want to do the costs up front, yeah, I don't mind doing it this way. Basically, right, if you sell on eBay as a business, if you sell us on eBay as public, it's free. But let's be totally honest with you, right? You shouldn't really be selling on a public account if you're buying and selling on. That is actually a business. That's reselling. And I think what you're going to find now, HMRC and DWP have all these extra powers. I think what you're going to find is more and more people getting in trouble on these private accounts, because business accounts, when you've got a business account, they may send you to HMRC, but they're not going to send you to DWP because you're already registered as a business. So you're going to find some people getting in trouble there. But if you're a business, the costs on eBay, well, I used to run eBay and I turn over £1,000 a week. Right, but I can tell you now, at the very least, 1 week's money a month had to go to eBay fees for my bills. So I was losing between 25 and 35%, depending on how many times I had to relist stuff, how much I currently had listed. Because what you got to realize as a business, if you're on eBay, you've got a shop subscription. The last time I was there, you had to have listing fees if anything above your shop subscription. You have promotional fees. You have commission on the sales. You have commission on the postage. Now, a lot of the people don't realize how expensive that is. Let's say, for argument's sake, now you sell a decanter, a Georgian decanter, right? They can be 2.5 kilos for a good heavy Georgian Irish cut glass decanter, right? Because there's a lot of lead in them. And to ship that to America is £40-50 postage. So there's another £5 on what's probably a £50 item. So there's another 10%, if not maybe 20%, just on the postage of the overall cost of your item. People don't realize it, right? It all adds up. And then on top of that, then they throw tax on it, right? So you're losing that money. Then when you actually do your accounts at the end of the year, you're taxed on your profits again. So you're paying tax on the money you're paying to eBay, then you're paying tax on your earnings off it. By the end of it, you're probably only doubling your money, getting 50% profit. So if you buy something for £20, sell it for 100, you're probably actually getting more closer to 45 to 50 back after you're paying your taxes and your costs. But people don't see that. They see it as you've bought it at this much, you're selling it or sold it at this much. Not to mention, they don't take into consideration offers. How often now, we're going to discuss this in another film, where we're going to talk about the impact of bargain hunts and antiques road trip and things like that on this business. But how often now do you get someone paying full price?
Very.
So what we ask has no relation to what we get. And what we get has no relation to our profit margin. People need to understand the actual costs involved.
I think I can speak from experience with this because, it wasn't long ago, 4 years ago, when I was in full-time employment, before, good over a decade, I was working full-time. I didn't run my own business. It's difficult for people to understand the cost that you have to run your own business. And even a business like what we have, which is mainly online. I'll go through a list of things, So we got labor costs, that's photography, transporting, time listing, that could be involved cleaning, that can involve all sorts of things with how much time that takes. In fact, I think I've probably done it a disservice. Photography, spending time researching and listing, that is a lot of time taken up. Your storage, which you pay for, say, in shipping containers and other units. In my case, I've currently got a retail store as well, so I'm paying for that. Advertising, social media doesn't cost any money, but it takes time up. You've got to build up your social media. And that's before we start getting to the risks that you talked about with postage.
You've missed a lot of costs there, mind.
That was a very light overview of what
you've missed the cost of your computer. You've missed the cost of your equipment, your photographing equipment, and your phone. You need a phone 100% to do your research when you're out and about. You forgot the fuel in the car maintenance, the entrance fees to the events. You go Malvern or something, it's £5-7 to go in there. You can go to certain car boot sales, buy in, and it can cost you £10 buying if you're not selling. A lot of car boot sales charge you £1 or £2 to go in. There are costs that add up. So even if it's through the year, I probably spend £300, £400 a year just entrance on places. Then you've got to take into consideration, you've got a business insurance on your vehicles. You name it, it's just everything. Then on top of that, then it's the insurance on your postage because of damages and lost and scams and all the rest of it. You missed a hell of a lot of costs involved.
Oh, that was light, and that's not even talking about tax as well and all that sort of stuff. So it's incredible how much that eats into. But £5 into £100, as if you achieve it, by the way. How much gets eaten into, and how many mouths you've got to feed before you actually take away your profit, and then your profit is probably used, if you think about it, to sustain the business. it's not any profit I get. Let's say I'm not going to come up with a figure because it could be all sorts. But any profit is very rarely just going in your pocket for you to live. That's money you've got to reinvest, and it's a continual cycle with what we do. So
I gotta be honest with you, I reinvest. I like to reinvest a minimum 75% back into the business. That's the only way for me to do it for the growth I want. I want my business, my website being a multi-million-pound business. All right. In the space of 5 years, I've got 7,000 pieces on there. So whatever I take in, I put back 75% into stock, into improvements, into services, whether it's website charges and improvements. You've got to put the money back in.
And that's how you've built your reputation as well, which allows you to achieve, I suppose, higher prices than most people. This is, again, another thing that people forget. This is an interesting point. I think I saw a dealer mention this on, where it might be? I think it was that TV show Porn Stars, actually, if you've seen that in America.
I have.
Yeah. So
that's the one in Detroit, isn't it? The really rough one. They're dragging them out the shops.
No, that's a different one. This one is in Las Vegas.
I know the one with Lee.
Yeah, that's him. Yeah, that's the one.
I know.
It's the guy who runs it there said somebody was trying to get him to spend over $1,000, and he made a good point, which I think rings true for us as well, which is as soon as you go over that $1,000 mark, the amount of people who are willing to spend that on an item, especially like a luxury item like an antique, diminishes a lot. It starts it sharply goes down, because that is considered a really high-end purchase. And the people who are willing to do that are very choosy about where they buy it from as well. So when you see items on our websites, potentially for that amount, I don't know if I've got anything worth that, maybe one or two things. But again, it just plays that point, which is that is probably going to be with us for a while before it finds the right buyer, that type of item. And we have to build a certain reputation to be able to get people to spend that sort of money and trust us enough to spend that sort of money as well. And that all cost. It wasn't something that happened overnight.
Well, that really comes under the risks, doesn't it? Right? We've already discussed, I suppose, the costs involved in selling, right? People don't understand the risks. So I'll buy something for £2, £3 at a car boot sale, and I might list on my website for £150. I know I'm going to have that for potentially between 2 and 5 years on my website, because with the antiques, they're not as collectible as they used to be. There's less and less people doing it. And that's why I try and go for less mass-produced items and rarer items. But the risks involved, where do you start? First of all, the risks are you never sell it at all. You're constantly paying storage on there and everything else on the item. Then you finally get a sale. You got the risks in, you got to wrap it and ship it. Are they happy with it? Is it going to be returned? You're going to have to pay the return postage. If it's from America, it can be £100 to return your parcel. Then you get hit customs again for bringing your own parcel back into the country. Because I had that. I sold back when tiles were really big, probably 10, 15 years ago. I was getting £100, £200 a tile for an Art Nouveau Majolica tile. And they were always going to America. And I sold a tile for £300. And it got there, and he moaned about the tiniest bit of crazing in the corner. Sent it back to me. I had to give the UK customs £100 to have it back in, because I don't know whether he hadn't marked it down as returning my own product or what, but the value was there. It was my own product coming back, and I still had to pay £100 for it to be returned to me. The risks involved, it could get damaged. Yeah. Right? It can get damaged or lost in the post. 99% of the stuff, antiques, glass, jewelry, things like that, anything outside the special delivery doesn't cover anything. There's so many exemptions with antiques, so we take the risks of loss, we take the risks of being scammed. There's so many different scams out there now. Right? Some of the scams, I'm not kidding you, right? People have had house bricks returned instead of parcels, and eBay have still given them their money back.
Yeah.
Right? You want to see some of the horror stories. So the risks involved are absolutely crazy risks.
I give a different type of risk as well. I think it's an interesting story for this. So I think last year I did a house clearance with a couple of other dealers. Not a house clearance, more of a house visit, actually. So it wasn't a case of just clear the house. It was a case of this was a big house. and the father, but quite a few daughters had passed away. But he had been collecting all sorts of antiques. It wasn't one type of thing; it was all sorts of different things. It was a big dark house, is what all I can remember it being. I'll come into it. That'll be a part of the point. So all three of us, we had a collection of things we bought. We paid for it. We paid good value for it. It was not cheap. They understood how much things were worth. When all three of us experienced, and when we got the stuff home, there were weird bits of damage throughout loads of different items that we didn't spot. Strange little cracks or weird little repairs done on items, on all sorts of different items, furniture, all of it. And I think the three of us came together and talked about it, and we worked out that basically what this guy had been doing was clearly buying job lots of stuff from auctions which was damaged, and then maybe doing his own little inventive fixes. But when I was going through the house, I spotted some bits of damage and left them on certain items, but not all of it. Basically, what I thought the items were worth turned out to be worth a lot less. And I clearly overspent on a lot of it, and all three of us had. Now, if I was to flip this idea of ripping people off, and I was to say, well, have the same attitude myself, in theory, I could say to them, well, you weren't upfront and honest with me because you probably knew all this, as the father had clearly been doing in most of his life. With that in mind, I probably could say, well, if we're talking about it, if this is the way things are, I can theory could ask for a refund and say, well, no, I'm not happy with this. I think you missold this to me. But I didn't. I don't think that's the case. I look at that as think, right, that's on me. I should have spent more time looking at the items. I maybe should have had a torch out, and I should have been a lot more aware of it. And it's just one of those things. I take it, I accept it, and I move on. So this works both ways, is what I'm getting at. It's not a case of just a dealer buying things cheap and then selling the expensive. It works the other way as well. It happens to dealers, and that's one example you've given over. There's other examples where we bought fakes and stuff like that. It happens at boot sales quite a lot to us even now.
Yeah, bad buys. There's a lot of things we have to take into our costs. First of all, we have to take theft into our costs. If we sell at a car boot sale and things like that, we know stuff's getting stolen. Those items that get stolen off us, we have to absorb into our costs. If things get damaged, or if we damage them ourselves, we have to absorb them costs. If we misdamage, as you've just explained there, that can affect the value. You'd be lucky to get your cost back of what you paid. Let's be totally honest with you.
Yeah.
You bought a pig the other day, right? A little faience pig at the car boot sale. The dealer didn't tell you about the damage. You bought it. I disappointed you telling you I'd already seen it and it was damaged. I spotted the damage and you said, shoot, that's going to have to go back on the boot sale. For probably less money than you paid. By the time you tell someone it's got a damaged foot, you'll be lucky to get £1 back.
Yeah.
The only way to get your £5 back would be to lie and do exactly what the dealer did and not tell them it's damaged.
Yeah.
So you're taking them types of losses as well, because if we get a hit, we take the hit. It's that simple. It's our fault. And what you will get from it is experience. The experience far outweighs the loss. I can't tell you how many times I've had a successful win, right? Where I've bought something for £1 or £2, sold it for like £500 or £1,000. I forgot about that by the next week. Because the hard stuff and the negative stuff is easier to focus on. That's just natural. People focus on the negative. If someone gives you good news, you struggle to believe. Someone gives you bad news, you believe it instantly without any evidence or support. And it's the same thing in the business. You take some serious hits, you never forget them. You generally don't. They stay with you and you learn from them more. So you may have lost a bit of money, but you've learned.
Yeah, definitely. It's you're programmed to remember trauma, aren't you, more than anything positive?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, an interesting point, if you're okay to move on a little bit, is I'm wondering if this is going to get worse rather than better, this perception. And part of that reason is because of how easy it is now with Google Image Reverse. And what that does is give people an idea of value. I have this all the time now when people approach me, usually when it's by phone. I think you had it the other day where they call you up and say, I know how much this goes for. It goes for £100. But they've just looked at Google Image Reverse, always populates. It's programmed, I suppose, to give you what you want to see. And if you're looking to sell something, it will show you results, which is people asking keyword asking the highest possible price. They very rarely do a little bit of deeper research, which any dealer would do, to see what it actually sells for. So their starting point is a lot higher. And if they ask you to make an offer and then you're off, say they've seen it up for £100, I'm offering a tenner, they're thinking, you scumbag, how dare you? So do you think that? Do you think it's likely to get worse because of that?
Well, in all honesty, I think it's as bad as it's going to get, because you've obviously, as we've already lightly mentioned, right, you've already had this with the TV shows for decades, telling people that dealers are making so much money on the stuff that the Antiques Road Trip and things like that can go in and offer 50, 40, 50%, and dealers take it. What they don't realize is dealers only take it because they're taking a loss because they want the publicity and they want to be on TV. They're not making a profit, they're making a loss. But they outweigh the loss versus the publicity and how many people are going to come from the exposure of the show. But it's not portrayed like that, because the dealers on there who are making them stupid offers, and I'll say this plain and simple, and you can not like it or not like it. If you can't find something a mistake in an antique shop, and you've got to cut them down by 70% to buy the item, you're not a dealer. It is that simple, like it or not. If you've got to knock somebody's price down 70% so you can find something you can buy, then you need more knowledge. All right. That's my opinion on the Antiques Road Trip and bargain hunts and things like that. Right. When they go into an antique shop and they knock someone down 70, 80%, and I've seen it, right, and they're there, oh, will you do it for this? And I'm thinking, you can't buy a cup of coffee for the price you're offering them, and that's a really nice item. Then they go into auction and they get 50, 60 quid back, selling it back to the trade. Right. It annoys the hell out of me.
Oh yeah, and that does feed into this perception as well, because what dealers don't really do themselves a favor with by doing that is it makes it look like, well, you overpriced in the first place. That's what the public will say. They'll think, well, if you were willing to sell it that amount, why were you asking that amount? And as you say, what they don't realize is why the reasons why they probably did that. So yeah, that's
it's not portrayed that way though in the shows, is it? It's actually made out as if they're still making a profit, right? Which is a lie, right? The Antiques Roadshow wanted to come to my shop when I had the shop in Mountain Ash. They wanted me to shut the shop for a full day, so I would have lost a full day's trade. So you're already out of pocket on a full day's trade, right? Then they would have robbed me for one or two items, and they would have had the use of me entertaining their viewers.
It's peer pressure as well.
For free, mate.
You're on TV. You don't want them to look like that person who's being difficult as well. They use that against you. I think they know that you.
Of course they do.
It's bad. It's almost like bad publicity if you're the person who's like, no, don't want to do that.
Let me tell you now, right? Things are as bad as they're going to get. They are not going to get any worse. If anything, they're going to improve, because AI is coming along, right? And what you're going to find is people will find it easier to value this stuff. But you and I both know there's a difference between knowing the value of something and selling something. Yeah. And if they know the value, and I already get this a lot where people doing Google image reverse, right? You hear me out. They turn around and say, well, I've done my image reverse. I know people are selling it for 100 quid. Give me 20 quid, you can have it. Then they can't come at me. They know what it's worth already. They've set a price because they've tried selling it and the public don't want it. Because let's be totally frank, the public are hard work. You know it, and I know it, right? To sell to the members of the public is hard work, right? Especially if you're selling at a car boot sale or market. If you want to sell for premium money, you've got to sell online. If you want to sell it at the market, right, you've got to be willing to pay. It's only worth what someone's willing to pay. Let's put it that way. And at the markets, they're not willing to pay that type of money.
Yeah, it's look, I understand everyone wants as much as they can get for the item, and no one wants to feel like they've been ripped off. And if they're, I totally get that. I think the problem is that hopefully AI, and I think it will. It will definitely, and I don't think that's very far along, where AI will be telling people how to actually sell it and the best way to get the amount of money, and it'll be telling them, look, if you want to sell it quick and you want some cash in your pocket, you go to a dealer and you accept this much. If you're willing to sit on it and you're willing to list it and you're willing to take pictures, and take all the risks on a dealer would, then you can get more for it. But a lot of people won't be bothered with that, because that takes time and risk and everything like that. So I think there's something there. The one thing is interesting as well as trends, though, isn't it? I was on this point, because what something could be worth, say, even last year, can dramatically change within the space of a year. I think we talk about it on the boot sales, don't we, with what we're noticing with most ceramics and glass at the minute, which is I can't even get £1 for the majority of it.
Well, I can give you a couple of examples now, right? Because I've been doing this a long time.
Hmm.
Let's turn the clocks back 15 years. 15 years ago, right, a Staffordshire flatback figure, 19th century one, would cost you £200 to £300 comfortably. If you had a rare one, you could get up to 1,200 quid from, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I used to buy Whitefriars glass at car boot sales. People didn't want to know for £1. Or mid-century furniture, Danish furniture, for £1. Or people were burning it. House councils were burning it 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Now, bring the clocks forward 15 to 20 years. Staffordshire flatbacks, you can't get £1 from at a car boot sale. Mid-century furniture is absolutely untouchable, crazy money. And then Whitefriars, a drunken bricklayer now can be up, especially a big one, 500-600 quid.
Mm-hmm.
I was buying coffin vases and drunken bricklayers for £1 each. I bought a hooped vase, and I mean a full-size hoop vase, not the giant ones, but a full-size hoop vase for £1.50 in Ebervale. That's how long ago that was. Well, that was going in the festival park. So that got to be 15, 20 years ago, and I paid £1.50 for it. Now it's £1,000 vase.
Mm-hmm.
Trends, things change. Now, what you also got to take that into consideration. You may have bought something for £5 and you're selling it for £100 on your site. It may sit there for 3 years. In 3 years, it might be worth £5.
Yeah, 100%.
It could be worth 5,000. It's the same with gold. I'm not being funny. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, gold for 9-carat gold was £3 a gram. Now it's almost £30 a gram. Now, if you've got stuff sitting on there for that length of time, it's gone up 10 times the value. You may have bought it for £1, it's worth 10 times more.
Well, I think with decorative antiques especially, not so much precious metals, but decorative antiques, more things are going down and up, aren't they? So the chances of you having something which you bought goes up in value while it's sitting on your website is a lot slimmer than it going down dramatically in value, I'd say.
Yeah.
So that's another, he's another part of it. And here's a point I'd ask as well, right? So anyone who thinks who doesn't like the idea of buying things, let's say for £1 and selling it, a massive profit of £100, hundreds of pounds, more than that. What do they want us to do when an item's is offered to us for £1? Then do they think that we are obligated to educate that person?
Right. Well, I have a lot of comments, right? Now, there's two different ways of looking at this. If I go somewhere and they say to me, make me an offer, and I make them an offer knowing they have zero knowledge, I try to make a fair offer.
Yeah.
Right? But I don't always get it right. Now, I'll give you an example. Ian, a friend and a subscriber of my channel, he come up to me at the car boot sale. He said, I've picked up a little miner's check. Now, it wasn't anything special. I thought it'd be a £10, £20 check. I bought it off him. When I went home, I checked it up. It was a £40, £50 check. I went back and gave him more money because I'd made him an offer. Doesn't mean we always get it right. Okay, we can look at stuff and we can undervalue it or overvalue it, right? But in this case, I'd made him an offer and I wanted to play fair. But on the other flip side of that, I went into a charity shop recently and I picked up a photograph. This photograph is by the top documentary photographer within the world, but certainly within the UK during the 1970s and 1980s. He is worldwide sought after, and I've got it up for £7,500 on my website. I may have paid £2 for it. Did I go back and say, actually, here's another £1,000? No, I didn't. If I pay full price, if someone says to me a price and asks me a price, and I pay that full price, as far as I'm concerned, the deal is done. They should, it's on them to value it, it's on them to say what they want. And that's just one example. I could give you loads. And I'll give you one more. Richard, you know Richard in Madley in Abergavenny now. We talk to him every week. Very good friends. I purchased a painting off him in Splot 4 years ago for £30. That exact painting is sitting on my website for £2,995 or something like that, just under £3,000. Did he get upset? No, he didn't. I went back the following week to say thank you. I bought his entire stall. And we've been friends ever since. But I didn't go back and say to him, well, you only charged me 30 quid, here's another 100. No, I could, right? But first of all, that painting still haven't sold. It's still sitting on my website.
Yeah.
3, 4, 5 years later, right? It may never sell. It may sell tomorrow, it may never sell. But if I was to go back to every single purchase I bought and say, oh, actually, I'm asking a couple of £100 for a year, another 50 quid. What if in 5 years' time I need money, right? And I can't sell it and I have to go to a car boot sale or somewhere myself and take trade price on it? I could end up losing money if I done that all the way through.
Exactly. I've got 2 points, I suppose, on this one. And the second one's an example. The first one I'll say is we talk about this a lot. Your education in this game costs, like it would if you went to university and got a degree. It costs in time, books, travel, mistakes, risks that you take on. That's a lot. That's time, risk, but that's cold harsh cash as well. That's cost of real money to be able to identify these items that we see on stalls that people have not valued. The idea that we owe people, we have any obligation to share that education with people, I find a little bit strange. It's not applied to other professions. It just seems to be one that is applied to us, and it's because of this perception that's built up over time. So I think that's the first thing. I think if you're asking us to do that, you should be really thinking that through, and just think about if you have the same standards. Do you have the same standards as yourself? That's the first one. What do you do for a profession, and would you work for free? That's one. And I want to give an example of what that approach gets you in the end, because I did a house visit, one of my first ones I did, where somebody's father passed away. He had a lot of items in the house. I went around there and I was quite naive. And I went around and they first of all showed me a room full of, as you took, mid-century furniture. Miracle. I wasn't buying furniture at the time, but they said, we're going to chuck all this out. This has not got any value. We're just going to scrap all that. I said, don't do that. This is Miracle. This is Danish furniture. This is worth quite a bit of money. I reckon it was a good 700 quid in that room, which I didn't want because I didn't buy it at the time. I then went round the house and I was like an open book with my knowledge. I was like, oh, this is my son. Oh, this is really nice. This is good. I was there for a good couple of hours. At the end of it, I said, right, here's my offer for this list of items. And they were like, yeah, let me just go and speak to my brother and sister. I was like, yeah, take your time. A couple of weeks pass. I message them and say, have you had a chance to think about the offer? And they said to me, so what we did was after you gave us the offer, we spoke to a couple of other antique dealers. We told them what you offered, and they upped the price on these 5 or 6 items. So we sold them, but we couldn't sell the rest. Do you want them? And of course, it was like, well, no, I don't. Now, I've got to be honest, that was quite a hit in the heart. I felt like an idiot, and I felt like basically I wasted a lot of time. And it was I suppose it was one of those. It felt a bit humiliating. I don't even think they thought of it as like using me. They just saw me as a free service. They just basically went around there, and that's what antique dealers do. And it just made me think, well, that's what you get. That's what you get if you just going around and being really open with everything. And I know it won't be the case all the time, but that's what can happen.
Well, let me put it this way. My education, self-taught, I've told you and I've told everyone else, I used to sit at a stall of a friend, right? And I would buy things off him at full ticket price, because he used to write a description of what the item was and then put the price tag. I would sit at his stall as often as I could for him to go around buying the car boot sales, to handle and look at his stuff. And if it was something I really thought was a fine example, I would pay the full price. My education probably cost £50,000. Because the amount of broken Chinese porcelain I paid 50 quid for and so forth, right, was a lot of money. I've got 10, 15, 20,000 pounds worth of books. My Chinese porcelain book on marks, I paid £550, £600 for it just for one book. My Whitefriars book cost me £300. Books on decanters and Georgian glasses, £100 a book, £200 a book. And I've got a couple of thousand books. Right, I got to be up 10, 15,000 on books. Right, that is no different to a plumber or electrician having to buy their books, or a philosopher having to buy their books. Right, I've got 10, 15 grand into books. I put probably 5,000 plus into broken Chinese porcelain, to have examples of Chinese porcelain. Then you've got to take into consideration the fakes I've bought, the mistakes I've made, and everything else. My education probably cost me £50,000 over the last 30 years. Not to mention, it's taken me 30 years to get where I am, as good as I am, right? And I am good, right? I can go to a car boot sale, and you've seen it yourself, right? You walk around with me, and I'm picking stuff up for 50 pence, and I'm selling it for 100 quid. You've seen it with your own eyes, right? It's not bull, right? I do it. But that is because I've got 30 years on me. But that is no different, right, than the story of a man who fixed the ship. And let me share that story with you, right? There was a cruise liner, if you like, or big, massive ship, right? And they broke down, and they phoned out 5, 6, 7 people. And these people were charging them, a couple of thousand a piece, and they were coming out, and they were trying, and they couldn't fix it. In the end, they phoned out this one company, said, yeah, I'll fix it for you, £100,000. So they had him in. He was there 3 minutes. He knew exactly what was wrong. 3 minutes later, he fixed it. He said, pay me. And they said, why am I paying you for 3 minutes work? He said, you're paying me for my experience. It's not the 3 minutes work. You've already had countless people out. Couldn't do it. It was my knowledge, my experience. I knew exactly what to do. I knew exactly how to do it. You're paying for the 30 years I've been learning to fix this. And it's the same with the antiques. They may see we're buying it for £1, but they're not seeing the decades of learning and struggles and hard work and sleeping in the back of cars at antique fairs. They're not seeing none of that.
Yeah, but totally. Just good afternoon, if you've missed the start, the live will show up on the videos afterwards, so you can go back and watch anything you missed. But thank you for watching and for commenting. So that is interesting, actually. That brings me on to another point, which is similar. So as part of looking into this, looking for things to talk about, I came across a thread on Reddit. So if you don't know what Reddit is like, I guess like a forum with all the categories you can think of. And there's one for like antiques, where antique dealers can comment. There's a lot of Americans. But the one thing I will say about Reddit is it's faceless. So I imagine there's a lot of fantasists who like to go on there. It's all about upvotes as well. So if you leave a comment, the top ones will be the people that got upvotes. So sometimes that influences it. But one person said they were an antiques dealer, and there was a thread about what's a fair price to offer. And someone's looking to sell an item, and they said, I'm an antique dealer, and I work on 50%. I offer 50% of the value every single time. Nice and simple, and I do that. And I just thought to myself, if I worked on that premise, I'd be out of business very quickly.
I'd be losing money.
Yeah, I agree. Same here. I'd be gone. I couldn't sustain that. This, I think it only works if you have a really high turnover, regular business, and you probably have to employ people. It'd be a totally different business model to what I do.
No, it could work. Because I will be honest with you, right? I used to work on I like to double my money on stuff, which is basically 50%, right? But I was working then in them days on a lot less costs. You can't sell online and do the traveling and everything else you do and work on 50% like us. As I've already explained, between all our costs and the taxes and everything else, we're losing 50% of our turnover. Right, in costs and taxes,
Definitely.
Right, and insurances and everything else, right? So, where's your profit? If you're paying 50% for something, where's your profit?
Yeah.
Even kitchen stuff, right? Let me give you an example. Right, chefs, they buy their produce, let's say £3. They sell you a meal for 40 quid.
Yeah.
They don't work on doubling up because they got so many costs that by the time they take all the costs out, they're still only making, 2 to 1, 3 to 1, which isn't a lot, because then you've got to look at growth. At the end of the day, right, you may be paying your fuel and your insurance now, but what about when your tyres wear out on your car? Your maintenance. What about if your car engine breaks? What about if you want to upgrade? Anything. These costs add up, and you've got to have a reserve in the bank. You can't live on double up. It's a load of rubbish. You can't do it. And I don't know any dealers now who survive on double up.
No, I think that's maybe. I was going to say maybe it was an old school business which has a lot of value, that has high turnover and stuff. But I think I can't even imagine them doing it these days. Maybe there was a time, maybe it's an American thing, but as you say, your costs will I mean, I think I'll be a bit out of business very fast if I started doing that. So that's unviable. It just gives you an idea of the margins we have to work to actually have a business. So we got this comment here from Limeline Binty. So I think you have to respect the person you're buying from. Too cheeky an offer and you'll piss them off instantly. Am I allowed to swear? Well, I just did. So thoughts on that?
My thought to that is this. I don't make offers. If someone's at the car boot sale or something and they say to me, make me an offer, I go, look, I don't want to make offers, don't want to offend you. If you're going to force me to make an offer, I'm going to pay £1. So tell me what you want up front. And that's what I say, and you watch me do it. Right? I don't make offers, but what I will say is I like to pay full asking price. If something's a little dearer or I'm a bit unsure or something like that, I'll knock them down a few quid. But if someone's selling something for a couple of pounds, I'm certainly not going to knock them down. If somebody was selling a big solid silver tea set for £100 at a car boot sale, and I know I'm getting £350, I'm not knocking them down.
Yeah.
But if someone is selling something at £10 or £15 even, right, and I'm thinking, well, I think I can get 30 quid for it, 40 quid for it, but I'm not sure because I could get back and I'm just taking a punt because it's not someone I'm familiar with, then I may knock them down a few quid. I don't know if that makes sense, right? But I get people all the time messaging me and things. You might, as we said earlier, right? I used to have a make an offer option on my website. I don't do it anymore. I took it off. And I haven't actually seen any reduction in sales. But when I had that make an offer option, I might, as you've said, I might be selling some for 200 and have an offer of 30 or 40 pound in on £200 item. That's not something I would ever do. I respect people too much for that.
Yeah, it's an interesting comment actually because it's in those scenarios I struggle with them, to be honest, because I always want to have a respectful conversation with people. The way I look at things is it doesn't really matter what I think I can get for the item. If someone's asking for a certain amount, then I respect that, and I say if it's too much for me, it's too much for me. I move on. So I don't have to have the item. A lot of people don't seem to look at it that way. They seem to think that you're obligated to give them. I sort of see when I don't watch them so much anymore, but when I watch reseller videos where they're going around and they get annoyed at people asking for a certain amount of money and they're like, "Oh, that's way too much." Well, they're not there to give you a living. If they want to earn the full amount, it doesn't matter if they're in a car boot sale or not. They can ask whatever they want. It belongs to them. If it's too much for you, you move on. It's the end of the discussion. And I'm like you. I'd rather just pay the full price that they're asking for. I very rarely negotiate down. Usually it's them asking me. If I say no, I'm not interested, then they'll say, well, how much are you willing to offer? But at least I then have their starting price. When they ask me just outright for an offer, like, well, make me an offer, I just kind of like straight away, I'm just thinking, what annoys me more is if I do throw an offer at them and then they go, oh, come off it. I want to at least double that. Well, so you did have a price. What you were hoping I was going to do is offer you an obscene amount. So yeah, it's like I think it's respect works both ways, I suppose, in that scenario. Is if you have a price, then name your price, especially if you've gone to a marketplace, I'd say.
Do you know what annoys me? And this is my biggest hate in this business, is that the seller of an item thinks they got a right to tell you what to do with the item after you've bought it. For example, right? They're selling an item. Let's say, for argument, someone's selling an item for £10. You pay them the full asking price, the £10. What you do with it after that is up to you. Your business has nothing to do with them. They've set a price in their head. They've said, I'm happy to take £10 for that. If I sell it for 10,000, that's nothing to do with them. It's not their business. I've paid them their asking price, and that's why I like to pay the asking price. Right? What I do with it afterwards, because they can't then come to me and say, well, actually, you know what? You knocked me down £3, knowing you were going to get blah, blah, blah. Right? And I've had that. I'll give you an example, right? I once bought a Welsh blanket off a dealer. And I was friends with this dealer, I've been buying off him for over a decade. And this is a dealer of mine, right? Who walks around car boot sales and buys stuff like we do for £1 and £2. He saw me at a car boot sale. He said, do you want to buy this? And he was asking, I think it was 125, either 100 or 125. And I said to him, look, it's a lovely thing. It's more than I want to pay. And I knocked him down by £25. But this is trade. I will haggle with trade, right? 3 months later, I bumped into him at a car boot sale. We're practically fighting. where someone had told him that, first of all, I sold a blanket for £300-400, and then that I was in the video taking the mick out of him, saying how stupid he was and how I bought it from under him and ripped him off and all this. I sat at the boot sale and went through 1,000 videos, because I got about 1,100-1,200 videos on my YouTube channel. I found the video. I walked up to him in the car boot sale and played the video in front of him. I said, first of all, there's the sold price. I sold it for like 210. Then by the time you take out all the costs, the commissions and everything, I made about 40-50 quid on the blanket. That's all I made. And I said, where on earth have I said that I sold it for 400-600 quid? Where on earth have I took the mick out of it? All right. We still don't talk to this day. He still scowls every time he walks past me as if I ripped him off. This is a trader who knows how the game works, mate. Explain that one to me, right? This thing that people think, right? Once you've bought it off them, they can still say, well, you dictate to you what you do with an item, really gets up my back.
Yeah.
Right. If I pay your price, if we agree a price, that's the end of it. That's the end of your relationship with that item. You got the money to go and do with what you please.
I think that's without a doubt. I struggle to see how you can look at it any other way. That's a very bizarre. I mean, if that's your attitude as a trade, then you're not strong enough for it, is how I would put it. You haven't got, we gave examples earlier on where exactly the same thing happened to us. It's how things go, and you should learn from it, and you should, you'll come back around. You'll find another one, even if it was as bad as he thought it was, which was he sold it for 100 and you sold it for 400. So what? You got what you made your profit. That's how I look at it as well. I'm often selling things which I know a dealer will go and make a good profit on. Why would I care about that?
I would rather sell the dealers. I would rather sell the dealers at half the value or something, or even less, right? And have it gone faster than hold out for a member of the public. If a dealer likes your item, the only issue with the dealer is price.
Yeah.
Can they make enough money? Are they comfortable? Can they afford it? Because it's also what you got to realize, right? Not everybody's in the position we're in. I got 7,000 pieces on the website, probably about £500,000 worth of stock at retail. Not many people can afford to sit on that for years for it to sell. I'll go back out this weekend. I'll come back with another £1,000 worth of listings, £2,000 worth of listings. We do it every week, right? A lot of dealers, it's not about what they make. It's also about what they pocket, what they can afford to spend. So something may be worth £300-400, but if they're offering you £30, they might not be trying to rip you off. That might be all they got in their pocket.
Yeah,
that is a whole thing nobody's even considering. Maybe they want that item. Maybe they need that item to pay the bills, right? Yeah. Maybe they've had a bad month of low, 30-40 quid in their pocket, and they're offering you everything they got. But to you see it as you're offering me 10% of the value. You're a crook. They might be offering them every penny in their pocket. They don't know that.
Do you know a show again? I'll try to go about shows, and we will do a set. There's definitely enough to talk about it. But show that gives that perception away is gives that perception of antique dealers is Salvage Hunters with Drew Pritchard.
Oh yeah.
He's a totally different league to me, is the way I look at it, in terms of what he can achieve, the profile he's got, especially since being on TV, and what he can ask for things, that he can go into a country house and say, buy something for £500 and sell it for £750. If you heard what we were saying earlier about that 50% markup, you might be thinking, if you watch a show like that, you'd be thinking, well, he works on a smaller margin than that. Well, I'll say, first of all, he hasn't always done that. Second of all, he'll pay more if he's on TV. I'm very sure of that. And
what about these getting paid by the TV show as well, mind? So he might be selling that item for free just to buy the item for the TV show. Because I know I bought stuff at full retail to have it on my website.
Yeah.
So he could be buying the stuff at full retail, making just 50 quid, 100 quid for a quick bang out to make the shows because he knows he's getting paid for the shows.
Yeah, he has to buy something everywhere he goes, doesn't he? I think that's probably part of the rule. So
it's not just that. How good would his show be if he weren't buying?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think I've got definitely on the house videos where people have watched that show and just think that we're all loaded like him and can go out and spend. I'll be straight up. I can't go to a house and spend, £10,000 like he seems to, or even like £5,000 on stock. If I did that, I'd be tied up for a long, long time. I'd have to sell it pretty quickly myself. I've got a budget as well, So this all plays into it. If as a result it feels like I'm lowballing you, if you ask me to go around, then as you just said, well, actually, it could just be what I can afford. I can't offer you more than I can afford, can I? So
And that's something people do not take into consideration, right? I know a lot of dealers. There's one particular dealer up in Madley. He was stalled next to us this week. I won't say his name. He lives 100% on what he turns over on the car boot sale. He's a very modest man. He doesn't have a huge amount. He is one of the nicest men in the world you will ever meet. But if he offers you £5 or £10 for a £100 item, that might be all he has in his pocket. That doesn't mean he's there taking the mick out of it.
Yeah.
And that is a whole thing people don't realize or think about.
Yeah.
Do they actually think when a plumber comes in, right, and fixes a leaky tap, right, which takes 2 minutes and charges £100, that they're taking the mick out of him? Or an electrician who comes in and may have to change a fuse in your main fuse breaker or something like that, right, and it takes them 10 minutes and they charge you £200, right? Do they feel taking the mick out of them?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, as well, and I think it's a good point to go on to just another part of it, which is because we focus on the money side of it a lot, and about what we do, and I suppose the benefit of what we do, which is beyond any money and profit. So this has come up over the last couple of weeks, but do you think that antique dealers get credit, I suppose, for saving history? I'll come out straight up and say it. Do you think that's something that, the perception of antique dealers, if you had to go around the public, right, and did an opinion poll on what do you think of antique dealers, it'd probably, a lot of people wouldn't know what to say because they don't know about it. But I imagine the strongest opinion will come through is negative, right? Do you think there is any credit at all which goes to saving history and sustainability, reuse, recycle? What do you think about that?
I think our job is one of the best out there for saving the planet and recycling. Right? Forget all these government schemes and all these bullcrap reasons, the government used to save the planet. It's all a load of rubbish. We are recycling. Every single item we buy and rehome is an item less in landfill. Right? It's also an item less that has to be made. Because if they bought something off us at car boot sale, that's one less product that has to be made to fulfill that demand. Right? Yeah. So it's both sides we saving. We're not just saving by keeping stuff out of landfill. You always got to remember that. Right? If I sell a glass vase today, they don't have to use the energy and the materials to make a glass vase tomorrow to supply that family. Yeah. So we save in both sides. We really are the best and bottom line of recycling. Yeah. Environmental friendly is unbelievable, is what we are, right? And people just don't give us credit. Now, just this season alone, right, I have pulled out 18th century Chinese porcelain that's been stapled. Nobody else valued it. It would have gone to the rubbish. And I'm telling you now, it's worth an absolute fortune and it'll be in a museum one day that people will be able to look at and go, wow, that's a piece 300-year-old. People used to eat food out of that tureen and things like that. You just had a beautiful Chinese porcelain jug. It was thrown in a box, wasn't even wrapped. It would have got broken by the end of the day. It would have ended up chucked out. That is history. The amount of stuff I've saved. I'll give you a nice example. You've bought a peg leg.
Yeah.
Not that long ago.
No.
The history and that from the war or wherever somebody would have lost a leg in Civil War or something like that, and then he was able to give them some mobility, the history of how the crutches came about. It's everything.
Yeah.
People don't realize I don't do this job. You don't. I don't do this job for money. No. Right. And I'll refer to a comment that someone once used, which was, nobody will ever be able to, I would never be able to find anybody who loves the stuff more than me. What their comment was, I buy it, put a price on it, put it up for sale, and they said, you're never going to sell anything. You're always going to be a hoarder because nobody loves the stuff more than you. And that was in part true. Nobody will love anything I buy more than me because I love everything about it. I love the history behind them. I love the manufacturing process behind it. I love it all.
And being in love with your items, as you kind of alluded to there, is dangerous, isn't it? Because that's where you do start overspending, and you become married to it. You end up stuck with it, and you haven't got a business anymore. You've got a collection, and how long can you sustain as a business if you took that approach to everything? It's an interesting one. We got to walk. Yes.
Have you seen my hoarder videos? My garages are full, my sheds are full, I got shipping containers full. But what I will say is, right, as much as I love everything, as much as I hoard everything, everything also ends up for sale.
Mm-hmm.
Everything.
Yeah, same. Well, I think same with you. It's only things that you've had as a gift, isn't it? And same with me that you'll
I
keep
keep
holding.
anything that's been given as a gift. No, I've had a lot of gifts off subscribers over the years. I really have. I even had a gift in Madley on Sunday off Jan. She bought Shannon Robb a cup of tea, and I was teasing her, saying, "Well, where's my cuppa? You knew you were coming. Where was my hot chocolate and this and that?" She come around the car boot till late, and then she bought a little Chinese sculpture of monkeys and things like that. And she asked me to look at it. I looked at it for it wasn't ivory or bone or anything. It was a resin one. And she said, "Well, that's all right, because I bought a few." So she gave it to me. And you know what? I'm going to put that on the shelf with everything else.
Yeah.
Because I don't sell gifts. When people give me a gift, but that's a whole different thing, because I struggle with depression. I've done all my life. When I'm feeling down, I'll sit there and I'll just go, that's all the people who appreciate what I do.
Nice.
So they mean more to me than the items or the money I can get from. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you can't buy that.
It brings me back up a bit, and I think, well, actually, there are people that care about the stuff I do, so yeah, I'm going to keep going.
Yeah.
And that's what I do on down days. I'll sit there and I'll actually look at the stuff people have wrote to me, the people have sent to me. I get messages all the time where people say, "Thank you so much for the videos. You've helped them get through things or helped them learn how to start earning a bit of extra money." I get it all the time. I sent you one recently, big long essay someone sent to me, and they're so nice. When you're in a down week, or maybe your sales are down, your buy-in's down, you're just stressed out, everything seems on top of you, you can just sit there and you can go, them gifts are of people that actually care about what I've said and done, and I've helped them.
Yeah.
So I keep all my gifts.
I guess as well, in your case especially, it's just that extra value that you're giving as well. I think most all dealers can talk about, how they're part of the sustainability, recycle, reuse, circular economy, saving history. But look, in your case, you've done over 1,000 videos as well, all free to view. It's all part of giving back, I suppose, isn't it?
I got a good community. I got to be honest with you, right? I've got a strong following. Out of my 18,000 followers, I get a good percentage view the videos, but not just view the videos, message me regular. I have one lady who every single year sends me a Christmas hamper. Anya, every single year she sends a Christmas hamper, but not just for me and the kids. She does one for the dog as well. So the dog gets her own hamper of treats and sweets off her, and she's done it every year for the last 5 years. Every year.
Fair play. That's nice.
It's just appreciation for everything we do. My videos, I try and help people. I don't always get it right, but I try to help. And some people have said thank you. And when they do, it means more to me than the cost of the items. I've had stuff sent to me worth £1. I've had stuff sent to me worth hundreds of pounds. One gentleman, a couple of years ago, said, can I have your address? I'm going to send you a present. He sent me 1 kilo of Danish and Swedish silver jewellery.
Wow.
I opened it live on one of the videos. I opened this box like this, and he put it down on the customs form. It was all just scrap metal and parts. I opened it like that. It was Danish earrings, Danish necklaces, Danish rings, Danish cufflinks. And it was a letter there saying, thank you. And it was all Danish and Scandinavian silver.
That's amazing. Yeah.
I know.
I think goes to show, I suppose. We have talked about a lot about the perception of antique dealers, but that's not clearly true amongst everyone. What we're talking about is the, I suppose, general perception, but there are, of course, pockets of people who do understand, I suppose, what goes in behind the scenes. Who are not necessarily.
Those examples with me are because of everything I've done to help. And the amount of people will say, there's not many people out there will share their knowledge. In fact, there's a gentleman who's going to be coming around with me, shadowing me now shortly on a Sunday. He's a police officer and he wants to do this part-time or hopefully full-time when he leaves the force. And he contacted out me and reached out, and I said, do this, do this, do this. And he tried contacting some antique stores, antique dealers, anything. He said, I'll come and work with you for free just to learn the ropes. He didn't even so much as get a response. Now, that's how I learned. But at this day and age, he didn't even get a response. People are so worried about extra competition or sharing their knowledge and tips, thinking the next person's going to beat them to that thing they need to pay their bills, that it seems everybody's closed up tight.
I know what you mean. It's I'm trying to hope I'm being careful with what I say now, but like I see this in an antique centre with dealers, which weird goings on around running other people down and stuff like that. And I can't say I've experienced it that much because, to be honest, I'm not there enough. I don't really get involved in stuff like that. I'm not a gossiper in that sort of sense. I just keep myself to myself. But I do hear stories of other dealers, like running other people down or trying to convince people not to buy, customers not to buy from them, and all that sort of stuff. So I guess there is another side to this, I suppose, isn't there? Are you looking for time, by the way?
Oh, we're all right. There's a fly have just come in and it's annoying me.
No,
Blue bottle. It's so loud.
I had that as well, actually, just then. But I wanted to quickly just cover as well, if it's all right, just if there is any exceptions to what we kind of given the case, I suppose, from our point of view. I think we've made a case strongly around how fair we are and why we make decisions we do. But are there situations where an antique dealer might actually do it, might rip off somebody?
Now, I'm going to share a story that's the other side then, okay? I've been at a car boot sale and I've seen people and they've gone, I'll give you the exact example. It was a lady selling at a car boot sale and she opened the box and her dad's watch was in it. Her late father's watch was in there. Yeah. And she said, I didn't even know that was in there. And she went to put it back in the car and a couple of dealers said to her, well, let's have a look. And they put her under quite a bit of pressure to sell, and they were making offers, and they put her under quite a bit of pressure to sell. In the end, I walked away. They bought the offer, but she didn't know what it was worth. She didn't want to sell it. She didn't mean to take it to the car boot sale. And in all honesty, they bought probably a very expensive watch for 40 or 50 pounds. Now, there are dealers that don't have the integrity, and they will intentionally rip people off. But at the same time, you can say no. You don't have to sell the stuff.
Yeah, like there are. I don't know of any examples, but I bet people will have stories where like a vulnerable person's been taken advantage of. I mean, you hear it not so much with antiques. Do you usually hear that where cold callers go around knocking the door and then they've signed people up to triple glazing or whatever it is?
That's worse than that, man. What about the people who walk around the streets? They post their leaflets through the door. We buy gold. We're in your area today, and they pay them pennies for the gold. Yeah. Buying all the gold off the old age pensioners and things who need the money and don't have any clue what the gold is worth.
Yeah,
I'm of the opinion if I go to somebody's home, I'll pay them a fair price. Yeah. If I'm at the market and they price it, I'll buy it at their price. Mm-hmm. That's why I don't like doing house calls unless I have to. I would much rather, if I go to somebody's house and they pull out, a Thompson Williams miner's lamp, I know I'm going to get 150 quid for it, or 100 quid for it. I'm going to feel guilty offering much less than 50 to 70 quid, right? Because they've called me out to use my expertise, and then I have to make what I consider a fair offer. And 2 to 1, 3 to 1 is a fair offer. So if I think I'm paying 50 quid and I'm going to ask 150, by the time I pay my cost and everything, I'm making a small profit. If I go to a car boot sale, you purchased 2 last week, absolutely some of the best lamps I've seen in years for £5 each.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, it's a good point. There is interesting you say that, because there is a bit of a difference, isn't there? When you go around someone's house, you've been invited around, they've reached out to you as a dealer. Like some people watch out and say, well, what's the difference then? But I guess it's because you're almost like being contacted in a different way. It's a different situation.
They're asking you for help, and they're asking you for your opinion and your knowledge. Yeah. Where if we walk around a car boot sale, people are not reaching out to us. They're not asking us for help. They're selling the stuff to whoever wants to buy it. It's publicly there on a table, and they put the price on it. Yeah. Right? You wouldn't go into Tesco's and say, oh, That's the clearance stage. They're selling that for £1. They want £10 down in Marks and Spencer's. Let me give you 8. You wouldn't do that in Tesco's, would you?
No, we didn't go very far if we did.
No, so why ask for us to do it at a car boot sale? But if we go to somebody's house, they'd specifically calling us out to say, look, we don't know what we're doing. Do you want to come have a look around, see if there's anything you're value? Tell us what it's worth, give us a fair offer, and we'll see what we can do. Right? But I'm honest to people. I had to tell them straight. I had to say, look, I'll probably ask this amount of money. By the time someone knocks me down, by the time I pay all my costs, I've still got to make money on it. So this is my offer.
Yeah.
Right? And then it's up to them. They can take it or leave it.
Yeah.
I do try and do that. Sometimes I may get home and see it's worth more than I thought. A fine example of that the other day was that box I had off a friend. I've been madly. He bought the box. I didn't know what it was worth. Dealers wouldn't buy it off him for £20. I had it off him at the end of the day at cost. And when I came home, it was exceptional, and I put it up for good money.
Yeah.
You take some wins, you take some hits.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I think the only other scenario I think where somebody, I'm not going to say ripped off, I'm going to say lose out, maybe a public member might lose out. Most likely scenario is like a house clearance. And that's where they call in a house clearance company. They probably get charged a couple of grand.
They do. It's not free.
It's not at all, no. But the house clearance company just come in and sweep up everything. And often, we buy from house clearance guys, and for some reason they're quite open about what they get. I don't know what they are, but they are. And they'll say, I got this, and this at this house. I think, though, in that scenario, that's just losing out. That's not being ripped off, because what happens in a house clearance situation is people see the value in the house usually, and they don't see any value in the contents. They just want it gone so they can sell the house. That is still on them. They could have happily gone around and collected all the valuables and taken it out before they got a house clearance quote if they wanted to. So, it's a situation where you lose out, but that's still, you can't see people like babies. People are adults. They can make responsible decisions. If they lose out, why is it looked on the dealer or even the house clearance person as the villain when people can just, people can go around and stop that happening if they care to?
There's a whole area you haven't covered. I don't know whether you had it planned or not, right? And that is this, right? When we buy something, up until now, we've always shared the costs. I've never hidden costs. If I buy something for £1 and sell it for 500, I've said I bought it for £1. And then you get people saying, well, why should I give you £500 when you bought it for £1? It's not about what I buy it for. I'm up 3, 4 o'clock a lot of the mornings to go to the markets while it's still dark. We go to multiple markets a week. We do miles and miles and miles of walking every week. We're digging in boxes on our hands and knees, looking through junk boxes and rubbish boxes. We're using our knowledge, decades of knowledge to find the stuff. And my answer is this. You've come to a boot sale at 10 o'clock in the morning, or even come onto my website for the convenience of just typing in what you want and buying it. Have you had to spend 30 years learning a trade, digging in the front line, on the floor, in the boxes to find these items? I have. If you want them at the price I've paid, you get out there and do what I'm doing.
Yeah, it's this. I guess that's making that point, isn't it? That there's not actually any barrier to entry for us for what we do. Anyone can go out and do it. So I put that comment up actually.
The answer is yes.
Yeah, we'll come to that in a second. But yeah, it's I suppose anyone who's making this argument about antique dealers ripping people off and just seeing us as villains and scumbags and stuff, I see this as quite a holier than thou sort of attitude. And you see it in not just this, some people have this approach with a lot of things you see in life now, which is getting offended on other people's behalf and trying to make yourself look better and more moral and ethical by trying to point out other people, unethical and all that sort of stuff. I think as we've gone through a lot here, there's actually a lot more to it than I don't think we're unethical anyway, for all the reasons we talked about. But the key thing is, who are you to get offended on other people's behalf anyway? People are adults, they're responsible, they can make their own decisions.
I've had people, right, turn on to the sellers when I'm at the stall saying, don't sell to him, he's a trader, he's a dealer. And I've had people take stuff off my hand and say, you're not selling to you. And I've had people turn around and say, he's paying the full asking price, mind. Everyone else is haggling.
Yeah, absolutely.
It works both ways. And with response to your question, yes, we collect or buy very, very similar items. We do go to the same car boot sales. We do about 4, 5, 6 a week. Or we live very close to each other. We're about 4 or 5 miles apart. So we're very, very close. So yeah, he does sort of annoy me at my boot sales. But what I will say is, if I follow Kieran round, he's still very young in the game, so I can still pick up after him when he puts it back down.
That has happened, yeah. So,
which has happened many, many times. But he is learning fast. I got to give him his dues. The only downside was, do you want to tell him the story of the jewelry box, or shall I tell him?
No, you do it. You're talking about, you know that you know the value more than me.
We hit down a honey hole. He hit on it first. What we call a honey hole is somebody selling real quality antiques, real quality jewelry, house clearance, don't care about the value. They just want to sold. He hit on a honey hole, and he comes up to a jewelry box, and he goes, oh, there's gold in this jewelry box. He picks up 2 cameos. He buys those gold cameos. Then he walks away. A woman come in, and she goes like that with a handful of gold and silver and other stuff, probably £1,000 worth of gold and silver, and she had it for £22 after this gentleman by Youre walks away. Now, the lesson he learned from that, he didn't get angry. The lesson he learned is, if you see gold in a box, you buy the box. Fine example account. We were in Madley the week after. I saw a box of jewelry on the table and going through it. She said, I want £15. I saw 1 gold earring in there, so I handed her the £15, and he had 12.5 grams of gold out of it for 15 quid. Fine example. But he learned the hard way that if you see gold in a box, you don't walk away from that box. He also walked away from the entire stall, which was a honey hole, in the hope to find a new honey hole up the road. And I start pulling out Chinese porcelain, then he's crying.
Yeah, I was more annoyed by that. Even though it wasn't as valuable, it was just what I liked more. So, yeah, I think, I mean, my reason for doing that at the time, I think, which is a lesson as well, I don't like crowds around in a boot sale. I get a bit, I'm just a bit like one of those, think if it's getting crowded, I think I'd rather go and see what's on the other stalls where everyone else is distracted. But sometimes there's good reason as a crowd. You're at the front of it and you got to take advantage of it. So,
but what I will say, right, this was a 25-foot stall, right? This was a big car. They had 6 to 8 foot either side of their car. So this was a big stall. They had stuff on the floor. They had stuff on the floor over there. They had stuff on the table. Let me just run down what I purchased off that stall. I pulled out about £200 worth of solid silver jewellery for a tenner. I pulled out 2 sets of Waterford drinking glasses for 20 quid. I pulled out this most beautiful Chinese porcelain vase with base and cover for £20. I pulled out a Japanese stacking box for 3 quid. And that's just what I can think of off the top of my head. We both walked away, and Rob picked up a solid silver bell for a tooth, for your first tooth when you lose your tooth, in solid silver for 4 quid. That's the type of stuff that was coming off this stall that this gentleman walked away from. So I don't mind going behind him, because at the moment, yes, he's good, but he's not a locust. The way I always describe dealers at a car boot sale is like a swarm of locusts, right? All the stalls are in there, and we're all behind the gate being herded like cattle, because that's how they treat us. And then they drop the fence, and it's like the Grand National. But just imagine a wave like the ocean coming in and crashing down on the car boot sale. But instead of water, it's locusts. And we pick the car boot sale clean as we go through it. He's not quite there yet.
No,
but he's getting there.
I agree with this comment as well. I that's how I looked at it until recently, actually. In fact, I went through a spell last year of starting to try jewelry. And all I bought was
Let's say it as it is. You saw me buy $3 worth of gold in a box for £3.
I saw that. Yeah, it made you think. It does make you. Well, how can it not? It does make you realize what the potential is. So this is what it goes back to, this education thing, doesn't it? And it's also about perseverance, because if I could have just stuck with that attitude of, no, I've had my hand by, I've been stung with jewelry enough now, I'm never buying it again. And even though that was a big loss in terms of the things I walked away from, there was a positive, which I did walk away with some gold, which was probably the first time I bought gold, to be honest. So
yeah, you had a 9-carat gold cameo for £4, and it was a good size cameo too.
So it was hopefully the start of something where
you also bought all the napkin rings in solid silver last week that you would never have had before.
No, definitely.
And that was 150 grams of solid silver last week.
Yeah. Q&A going, yeah?
All the time.
Yeah, I haven't got enough to do that yet, but different story with you, isn't it?
The answer to that is yes. I've done multiple videos. I've even bought 14-carat gold pocket watches, for a couple of quid and gone, do you know what? Let's make a video, see how much gold is in here for people to know how much gold's in them. And I've destroyed the watch. It wasn't running anyway, but I've destroyed the watch, weighed it in, made £400-500 on the watch, and then I had people shouting at me going, you destroyed it. There was a perfectly good watch and you ruined it. And I'm thinking, yeah, but I've done a video. I've done the same with some silver brushes. I've done videos. I thought back in the days, I used to do experimental videos. So let's say, vanity sets, solid silver brushes and mirrors and that. I've done videos on destroying them to tell you how much silver's in them. So if you wanted to know how much silver's in one of the handheld mirrors, Victorian handheld mirrors, I've done a video on it. I literally stripped it down and weighed the remaining silver so you know how much you can pay. And I'm not going to tell you, but if you want to know how much it is, Key, you'll have to watch that video. Same with brushes. There was the two types of brushes. You had that type and the handheld, big brush. I broke those down. I thought, I'll provide a service. Brushes and things, they don't sell. But if you were looking to sell for scrap, then you need to know how much silver's in them. Yeah. So I done those videos.
There are some items, this is true of even brass now, isn't there, where they're worth more in scrap than they'll ever be in resale. It doesn't matter how
gold is at an all-time high now, right? And you're never going to be able to sell pieces for as much as you can melt them. I picked up, 2-3 weeks ago, I picked up a 9-carat gold necklace in Gethley. It was 15 grams, which meant it was £420 of scrap at the time. £420. Do I try and get 450 or £500? I went to Abergavenny. Someone came up to me and said, you bought a necklace this morning? I said, yeah. I said, it's 420 a scrap. He handed me over the £420. He actually handed me 450 because he wanted the pendant with it. But I made £447 profit in an hour, whereas I could have asked £500 and had it for 2 years.
Yeah. Interesting that. Trying to think how that is. If some people watching this saying, "Well, what are you talking about with this whole ripping off people?" But again, it's getting up early. It's being there first. It's walking around.
And it's also the reason. Let's answer this question: do you feel ashamed of what you do? Because I don't.
No.
I'm one of the dealers that don't hide it if I go into a charity shop. If someone asks me at a car boot sale or charity shop, are you a dealer? I'll say yes. And it's worked in my advantage because many a time they've said to me, give me a card and I'll give you a ring, right? Or they've said, I've got this in the car, are you interested in buying it, right? So I don't hide it, I don't lie. Some people have said, go away then, right? And others have said, oh, have a look at this then. But the upshot is, are you ashamed of how you behave when you're buying stuff for £2 or £3, selling it for hundreds? And my answer is no. I'm buying stuff that people don't want. Irrelevant what it is. I'll pay the asking price and I will buy stuff that they don't want, that in all honesty would either end up in a charity shop and then end up in a CEO's purse, their salary, or in a dump. Let's be totally frank. They fill their cars up, they go to a car boot sale, wherever's left, it'll end up down the dump, being buried.
That's a really good question. And I think anyone who's a dealer watching this might want to think about that, because I know for a fact a lot of people do hide it. This is true of dealers, it's true of resellers as well. They'll put videos out where they're making out, oh yeah, I'm going to take this home, and I know a guy, you've probably seen him as well. I see him every week at the car boot sale, and every time he tries to buy something, he's coming up with some sob story about how he's going to use it, or I've been looking for one of them. And I thought, well, how much stuff are you looking for then? It's obvious.
It'll be on marketplace by the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly. It's like I don't get. I've made a decision quite early on that as soon as I start hiding it and lying, then that's exactly your point. I'm ashamed of it, and maybe then, if I'm ashamed of it, there must be a reason for that. I'm not, and I've, I said we've talked about all the reasons why, in terms of, I pay asking prices, paying asking prices. Everything I've learned has come at a cost, and as I say, there's a lot of people. People have to realise, I suppose, if they're going to throw this accusation out, of all the costs that actually go into the business. I don't, maybe if you did it yourself for a bit, you would understand a bit more about why we, why we need to be making these margins.
Let me make this point. I've mentioned already, right, about people's attitude, when they find out you're a dealer. Right, that's what we're discussing here now, right?
Yeah.
My local charity shop, Rowan Tree Cancer, 4 years ago, put up big signs, no traders allowed, banned. All right. Now, first, it's 2 points I want to get to this, right? The first point is dealers go in there and sneak in there. And they say, oh, no, we're not dealers. We're going in there. We buy in for ourselves. We buy in for our house. And they come up with this story. Oh, I want 6 different size shoes. Oh, that's all the family, that is. If they want 6 different pairs of shoes, or there might be 4 or 5 outfits. One's a size 18, one's a size 6. Now, come on. Use a bit of common sense, right? But they go in there, they lie that they're dealers and so forth, so they can keep going in there. My attitude towards it is, if you don't want dealers in there and you don't want dealers' money, that's on you. Your loss, right? And the second point of this is, right, they hate dealers that much, right, that they've actually contacted one of my friends who's a local antique dealer in Mountain Ash, right, to try and sell him the stuff from the charity because they can no longer sell it because they banned the traders. So they're now trying to sell it to trade because they can't sell it to the public. That's how much they need us. And that's Rowan Tree Cancer Care down in the Mount.
It's interesting, isn't it? We're probably one of the few people in the local area who will buy that stuff, and actually go and sell it elsewhere. It is interesting. Not many people, not many members of the public buy what we buy. Just
they don't know what it is. A lot of them don't know what it is. Now, I've done multiple videos on charity shops and things like that. And I actually done a couple of live videos talking about this charity shop down here, and weighing up exactly what's said by there, that without trade, charity shops would never move the tonnage they move. Right? Because 90% of people go into a charity shop, go in there looking for something to sell on, whether it's on Marketplace, whether it's on Gumtree, whether it's on Facebook or eBay. They're always looking to sell on. Very rare do you have someone going in there looking for something for themselves. Even if, right, and I don't mean this racist, so don't take it racist if anybody's watching, there's a lot of foreigners that go to Waste Savers in Penalta and they send it back to where they've come from, which is a good service. So, for example, we know there's a gentleman goes around the car boot sales and Waste Savers in our area, and he takes it all back to Africa. That in itself is still a reseller or a dealer.
Yeah.
Because is he giving it away when he goes to Africa? Is he a charity, or is he selling it on? They need to understand most of the people that go there are looking to move it on some way or another. And if they buy in 10 pairs of shoes, right, all different sizes, then how many feet have they got? How many legs have they got?
And who, I framed this question specifically about the perception around antique dealers, right? This is what this is about. But as you just touched on there, who's not a reseller now, right? So who goes into, say what we buy for £1 is worth a lot more money. How many people are buying that for £1 to treasure it for the rest of their lives and not see it as anything, not think of it as being worth a lot more? Do you know what I mean? I don't know how many people would actually say, I'm not buying that from you for £1. I have to give you 300 quid for it or something like that. I think what you're finding, and I think you're probably a bit out of touch if you don't realise this, that if you go to car boot sales at all, almost everyone there is a reseller in some form. Different scales. Some people will keep things in their house for a bit, maybe not rush to sell it. But most people are buying things, knowing that there's resale value with it.
The very bottom of that scale would be people who buy groups. So they might come up to us and say, right, well, we got a group of ceramics or a group of coins or something, and they'll buy it and they'll sell on the ones they don't want to keep funding the ones they do want, and they'll keep 2 or 3 out of the group. That's certainly around the bottom end of what you get at car boot sales or charity shops and things like that. Very few people, you may get the odd collector who'll go in and go, right, well, I collect that and that, so I want that one out of a group, and I want that one. They stand out a mile, don't they? Because they won't try and buy the whole lot. They'll only buy what they want. Where a dealer will come in and go, oh, you got 26 coins there? How much for the lot? A collector will go, well, I got that one, that one, that one. I don't want them. I don't want that. Even if they're the more valuable ones, they'll only want the ones they need. And they'll only justify spending on what they need. And they are very few and far between. Everybody's a dealer these days.
It's just so easy to just turn up on Marketplace or even eBay is getting easier and easier now. So, yeah, you've got to be out. If you can have this attitude in life, then you're going to get caught out behind, because I got an opinion that, people are now going to car boot sales who, are not, are basically just, if they see something worth more than it's been asked for, they're gonna pick it up and they'll chuck on eBay. I know mates who've done that with these Jellycat things. They obviously know about these Jellycats. These are little toys. They're really collectible and valuable. And I've got mates who know how much they are because they bought them for their kids. They've gone to a boot sale or a fair, like, a school boot sale, and seen people selling Jellycats for £1. They buy them, they just chuck them on eBay. They're not resellers, but they're not going to pass that up, are they? If they can make a quick bit of money.
eBay are now letting public sell for free. So how easy is it for the public to now pick something up and sell it for free?
Yeah. Easier than ever, and going to get easier, I'd say.
Yeah, but they don't value the dealers because they haven't gone free for trade. And people don't also realize that, because people go, well, it's worth this on eBay, so I want this. And then you go, yeah, but I got fees. No, you haven't. It's all free to sell on eBay. For you, not for me. I don't sell on eBay anyway, but in general, okay? I haven't been on eBay for 6 years. I'm 100% on the website. But I'm just talking in general, right? This is where you get the car boot sale. They go, well, I've looked, it's worth this amount on eBay. Then why aren't you selling it on eBay? Put it on there yourself. Deal with the customers yourself. Get ripped off yourself. Find the scammers yourself.
Yeah, they rarely ask. It's interesting, isn't it? That kind of gives you the mindset. If they say it's worth, I've seen it sell for £100 on eBay, and usually they're asking for like £60, £70 for that item, then, aren't they? As if to say you can make going off. But it's like that
doesn't even cover the costs.
It goes in. Yeah, for me, that's nowhere near what I can buy that item for. I don't trust your logic of it's selling for £100 on eBay. I guarantee that's not the case if I looked into it. And B, as we've talked about, there's costs of selling on that platform. There's all, I don't want to go over the same ground, but there's all the costs that we have to take on. Maybe for someone, if that's true, if it's selling for £100, someone who's just doing it as a hobby or something, or it's just going to...
A member of the public who could sell it for free?
Yeah, they could possibly do that, but not a dealer. A dealer's is a totally different ballgame. It's 20 to 30% you're losing on eBay if you sell on eBay.
Well, we've already talked about the costs, right? So half of whatever you sell it for is gone.
Yeah, easily.
Then you've got to take out what you pay for it. So if it sells for £100 on eBay and they want 50 or 60, right? You've got to take 50 quid off that 100. That leaves you 50 quid. So you're already breaking even or losing a tenner. Then you've got the cost of it. Let's say you paid 50 quid. You've lost the money, obviously. Right? Where's your profit? Let's say you pay 25 quid, right? You're only making 20 quid, 25 quid on it. And you've got to run your little business on that and pay your salary.
Exactly. You've got to pay your salary, and then you've got to reinvest that, as we've already talked about as well. So it's just all dwindling down, isn't it?
I've argued over and over with countless dealers and resellers, right? And I've tried to bang this point in with a sledgehammer, right? That if you don't reinvest, you're never going to change. You're always going to be desperate to go out there and find a bit of stock and sell it on eBay. And you're always going to be in the same low income you're on. The only way to grow is to invest and grow, right? I'm not kidding you, right? I lived on hardly anything. People think, right, that I built this up because I had a silver spoon up my ass. I built this up. I was borrowing money to go to auctions, buying job lots at auctions, selling them at car boot sales. I've started off sleeping in the back of my car or sleeping under my car to keep my stock dry in the car at antique fairs. I started the hard way, right? And I'm talking about some of the hardest times you can really think of. I really am. I don't know. What do you think? You know what I mean?
I gave up quite a comfortable career, which was going places to do this, and taking, gone from that to being completely self-employed and taking a risk, and it's not for the money. I'll tell you that much for sure.
Yeah, but you're reinvesting now. You're building on a website.
I'm
You were
opening
still
one,
selling on eBay. You're still selling in your pumping station and your other platforms, but you're investing on eBay. You're reinvesting in yourself. I lived for years hand to mouth, reinvesting 90% to 100% of my turnover back into new stock. I invested thousands into my website, right? Everybody was there. You'll never compete with eBay. Blah 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 blah. Right? I get 100,000 views a month to my website. I take as much now or more now on my website than I ever did on eBay, and it's commission free. I pay 1 or 2% to PayPal for handling the money, but there's no 30%, which is what I was paying to eBay.
Yeah.
I have tried explaining to people, right? There's a way to do this, and you've got to grow. And you can still work eBay and take one item a week and put it to a website. Build a website and grow. I've tried hammering that in, I don't know how many times. You were doing it, right? And you're getting sales on the website. Yeah. It's not enough to support you financially just as its own yet, but it's growing fast.
I'm in a transition of kind of, foot in each door at the minute. So I put things on eBay more expensive. So if you see my stock on eBay, don't buy on there. Come to my website because it'll be cheaper for you. It's the first thing. I add on the costs of eBay to the asking price. So the idea behind that is as you say, I don't get enough sales on the website to sustain me. So I'm using eBay to keep everything afloat. And every time I get a sale on eBay, I'm sending them a letter saying, thanks for buying. By the way, if you're interested in looking at more of my stuff, go to my website. It's here. It's cheaper for you. I can't say how much people should be doing that because there's no reason not to. You can do both. And then eventually you'll get to the point which Edward is, which is you're fully on your website. You're not losing any of your sales. Keep in mind that all the sales I'm losing out because of the price. I have to price it so high to be on eBay as well. So eventually, hopefully in the near future, I can go completely off eBay and be like you and just be all on my website.
Another way to look at it, right? How much stock can you buy for £1,000?
Ooh.
You don't need to answer it, but just picture in your head, right? I was taking £1,000 a week on eBay, right? Average. Some weeks were fabulous, other weeks quiet. Let's just say round it down to about 1,000 a week. I was losing over 1 week of wage every month to eBay. So that is a minimum £1,000 a month was going to eBay, right?
Yeah.
How much stock can you invest if you're not parting with that to eBay?
Yeah, exactly.
That's your growth.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and as you say, you'll build up, and then every sale you get on that website is going to be worth a lot more. And you find that you have a better relationship. But you've built your brand actually means something when you bought something for your website. I know we're going to a totally different subject now, but if someone's bought from your website, they bought from you. If they bought from you on eBay, they bought off eBay. They don't really associate it with you as much.
Actually, branding is on target with what we talked about because people's opinion of antique dealers, right, and resellers is very important. When you build a brand, right, and it's bang on for this video, in all honesty, right, when you build a brand, you're building a brand of I'm a reputable dealer, I'm a trustworthy dealer, you get what you buy. So my descriptions are honest, my photographs are honest, I do the best to pack it and get it to you safe and in one piece. You're building a brand. You're combating that feeling and the negativity that everybody else has around antique dealers when you have your own site, like Drew Pritchard or any of those, right? They've built a brand around their name which takes that sledgehammer to that opinion that antique dealers are scum, bottom feeders, and all the rest of them comments.
They're acting like we operate in the shadows, which we don't. We're completely transparent, really. Whoever I buy off can go and find out how much I'm selling it for. As we talked about, we're not hiding who we are. We're not pretending to be anyone else. We put our faces out there on YouTube. So as you say, as a result, we go to the same places every week. People know who we are, and that comes at a cost a lot of time as well. That's another point, as we already talked about. That comes at a cost because prices go up. I don't mind. It's not the best attitude, maybe, but I don't mind paying as long as I'm still comfortable. I'm making my profit, but as you say, it gets to a point where you end up can't deal with the person, and And that's dealer. I'm talking about dealers now. I'm not talking about the public. I'm talking about people who are there every week, so they recognise you and know you come back to the store every week.
There is a good side to that, though. Sometimes the dealers up the price on the wrong person, not realizing they're not dealers or they're too tight to part with the money as dealers, and they'll put the item down, and then you get a wonderful item for a little bit more money that, in all honesty, some other numpty would have bought for £1 if they haven't got the knowledge. So let's say, for example, a dealer pulls out a piece of 18th century Chinese porcelain. You were stood there, wet in your pants, praying for him to put it down. And if the seller says to him £2, he's going to buy it whether he knows or not. If the seller says to him 20 quid, that dealer may go, oh, no, thank you. In which case, you're pulled your pants and you've got it.
It happens all the time. It happened on Sunday when someone we know, I saw them at the store pick up, I thought they were beautiful brass candlesticks. I couldn't see I was wondering, they might have been Chinese. I don't know. They look really good. And I was like, oh, please overprice him. I don't know if he'll pay as much as I would. And I went, £1 for the pair? I was like, oh, for God's sake. So that's probably gone and been scrapped for brass now, which is, but yeah, I remember thinking they're probably, I'm not sure, they might have been 30, 40 quid for, I know. I was like, I really, if they asked for,
you wanted them.
Yeah, they look good. Hope they have to both scrap, but no £1, so they're gone, and God knows how much stuff gets scrapped and ruined because not dealers buy it. People who are not dealers buy it. But there we go. That's another subject again.
Yeah.
Well, I think we covered a lot there. I don't know about you. Is there anything else you think that needs to be said?
I think we covered pretty much everything, to be honest with you. It was quite an in-depth discussion on it. Now, I know we've been more biased towards arguing. We're basing our arguments on how we operate. Not everybody operates that way, but at the same time, I'm going to say this. All sellers can say no. All sellers can say, I want this amount of money.
Yeah.
They don't have to sell it. The only time they feel pressured to sell it is if no one else will buy it and they need the money. But then, if they need the money and they've got to sell it for that money, then surely they need the money more than they need the object. So if they can get any money in, it's going to help them more than an object that nobody else is willing to pay for. Now, there's lots of things people need to take into consideration, but the overall view of dealers, in all honesty, at the moment is where traders used to be 10 years ago. The public view has changed on traders, tools, people, things like that over the decade. So fingers crossed, with more of an understanding of what we do and what's involved in what we do, they may actually have more of an appreciation and an understanding of why we have to make the money we do. Why do plumbers and electricians have to make £100 an hour, £200 an hour?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's no different. We may work 100 hours in a week, 120 hours in a week, right? By the time you research it, clean it, photograph it, drive to it, get it, find it, and all the rest of it, right? Our hours, they're as valuable as anyone else's.
Yeah, I don't care what anyone says. Any fortune I make at any point in this game will have been hard earned, and as hard earned as anyone else who has it. And I'm not there yet, but I tell you what, I'm putting the work in now to try and get to that point. And I would say as well, I think the points we've covered, we've looked at it very much from an antique dealer point of view. A growing trend and side hustle / full-time for a lot of people is reselling, not in antiques, in just, modern sort of items, whether that be toys and whatever. I think everything we said applies to you as well. Because I don't see many resellers who look at the things like we do. And they very much do work in the shadows, in my opinion, just kind of, don't seem to appreciate what they've got. And we've talked about car boot sales and how fragile they are. Don't want to cover that ground again, but yeah, it's interesting. I think if you're a reseller, I'm not trying to cast everyone with the same stick. I'm sure there's lots of exceptions, but I think what we're saying applies to you as well, and it's worth engaging and thinking about the points we've raised as well.
Well, I got to say, just to finish it off, then, right? I think all the stuff we've said about antique dealers might be making an offer with all the money they got, it's exactly the same. Right? Resellers a lot of resellers are out there trying to make a bit of money because they can't survive.
Mm.
Nobody at the moment can pay their gas, their electric, their water, their council, and everything else, right? If you're not on benefits in this day and age, you're struggling. It's that simple. The only people who are not struggling are people on benefits, right? If you were working a full-time job, right, between the taxman robbing you and all the utilities robbing you and everyone else robbing you, right, then you're struggling. And these people are looking to make just a couple of pound extra every week. So if a reseller comes in and buys a pair of trainers that are used, unwanted for £1 or £2 and sells them for 20 quid on eBay, best of luck to them. I don't care. I really don't care. I got nothing against any resellers or antique dealers or anything else. If you would, they're providing the same service we provided. For everything we've said does apply to them too. The same reasoning behind why we offer our stuff is probably the same reasoning behind them. Because if once you sell a certain amount on eBay, you're on a business level anyway. It's that simple. And if they do an irregular, they're on a business level. And I don't care what you buy. Resellers are looked at like trash. Dealers are looked at like trash. And in all honesty, with people making a living and providing a service.
Yeah. That's the point I make. We all need to stand up for ourselves and not operate as if we're doing something wrong. We're totally, what we do is as old as time, by the way. You know, buying something cheaper to resell it that's how economies work, and you know, to suggest it's anything other than that is strange. So I think these perceptions do matter, and I would say that anyone who buys something to sell it on for profit, everything we said applies to you. And I would just ask you not to be ashamed. Build your brand, build your reputation. I think you will find the more open you are about what you do in terms of what you do for a living. And I don't mean on YouTube to get the YouTube views. I mean just when you're out and about, you'll find more opportunities open up for you. If you tell people who are, public that you're a dealer or you're reselling, the chances are they'll sell more to you because they're there to get rid of their stuff. So it's not many people who will say, I'm not selling to you now. Usually it's other dealers, and they're the ones who are.
I know people who won't sell to the public at all. I've been to antique shops, right? And they said trade only.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know anyone as far as that, but I know some dealers will say they hate dealing with the public. They'd rather do all their business with trade, yeah. I've also seen dealers the other way. You say they won't sell to the trade. They will never sell to the trade. You could offer me exactly what I'm asking for, and you could buy my whole shop, but I will not sell it to you. I know someone who does that, who's proper old school, who has that approach, and he has his reasons, but I've never understood. To be honest, I don't get that at all. But yeah, I've seen him say no to someone offering him his asking price, who he knows is a dealer.
Right. So if you've got nothing else to add in, I just want to say about next week's video, if that's all right with you.
Yeah, cool.
I've decided from today's video, we're on my channel next week, so if you want to see next week's live, then it's on Antiques Arena on YouTube. And if you're okay with it, we're going to do antique trends and prices.
Yeah.
What's in fashion, how fashion's changed. We touched on it at the beginning, and it gave me the idea thinking, do you know what? That would be really good and interesting to give people an eye-opener on how things change, how things can be worth money now, how they weren't years ago, and vice versa. So if you're all right with it, we'll have a chat next week on the antiques that have gone up in value, antiques that have gone down in value, and just trends.
I'm very happy to talk about all the items I can't get £1 for the boot sale. There's plenty of them.
Well, if nothing else, right, it's going to tell people what to stay away from and what to look for.
Yeah, that'll be a really good one to talk through. Yeah, interesting.
So that'll be on my channel next week.
There we go. Join us there. And thank you, Limelight Vinty, for commenting as well. Appreciate it. I think that covers everything. Now it's probably one of our longer videos. I thought it'd be shorter, but it was we got going there. That was really interesting.
We covered a lot of good stuff.
I think so. Yeah. If you're watching later on, please leave a comment and let us know what you think. But thank you for watching, and until the next time.
Thank you very much.
We'll see you again. Bye bye now.